Now, it's breathtaking, really, when you think about trying to encompass that much material in 25 minutes. I had that same feeling yesterday when I popped on the TV and Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers was on. I have never understood these films. I know that one's almost 10 years old. I've been working on this for a decade. My mistake was I saw the second one first. I've been lost ever since. All I remember from the few minutes that I saw was Nine Rings and Second Breakfast. I thought that reference to that other breakfast was really intriguing. It's kind of like brunch, but not really. And I thought, I turned it on and I thought, oh man, I'm just never going to get this. I mean, it's such a huge, sweeping epic. And I think that's how people feel about the Old Testament too. I mean, when you just consider the sheer bulk of it, my goodness, 39 books, 929 chapters, 23,000 plus verses, and 593,493 words. If you're a Cal student, that's enough for you to write a term paper 2,375 pages long. Who does that? When you look at the sheer scale of it, you get that kind of epic movie shock because it is a big, sweeping, epic kind of story, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, or War and Peace, or Iron Man. Just big, it's got that big swoosh to it, and the sheer scale of it gives you sticker shock. You go, oh man, it's just so massive. I'll dip into it, but I need some comfort from the Psalms, and I'll dip into it later if I think one of the Proverbs might help me, but basically let's leave that alone because I don't have 47,000 hours to get into it. Then I went to YouTube and looked for the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers trailer. That was only 2.5 or so minutes long. The movie is 179 minutes. It is almost as long as the Old Testament. And when I saw the trailer, all of a sudden, I didn't have the whole picture, but it made it kind of, all right, I get it. There's this big, angry, red eye that says, bad things. And there are these rings that make everybody bad and selfish. And then there are these small people who run through the woods in the dark, screaming with swords. And in the mix there's some kind of conflict. And if you see orcs, you kill them. No ethical problem there. You mow them down like trees. That seems to be the. So I felt like I understood enough of it that now I could go back to movie one and maybe kind of walk through, and I would sort of start to get it. So today is really the trailer for the Old Testament. It's not going to be the whole story by any means, but maybe it gives you enough of the bits and pieces to make the whole thing seem doable. That it is comprehensible and it's extremely valuable. It's a huge part of the Christian tradition, and really you rob yourself if you don't open it up and enjoy it and immerse yourself in it and really let it speak to you, because all the words in the book, they're all there for us, and they're all there to help us and to help us live better and to know God more fully. Now, if you think of that whole big epic sweep, you've received a small handout this morning when you came in that has a couple of diagrams on it. We are not going to work our way blow by blow through all those diagrams because that would be the Old Testament in 25 weeks. It's also obviously not a professionally produced piece of literature. It's just a little teaser invitation to get you to go to Google and look up the ones that you can use at your house or on your phone, because these resources are fantastic. They summarize the sweep of the whole story by books, by history, by geography, in really incredible, quick, easy, high-quality ways. So on one side, you've got the books. The other side, you've got the history. And this can give you the helicopter view of the entire enterprise. And you know what it will do? It will make you feel like it's a hill you can climb. Now, it will take some time, but that time will be worth it. So if these guys can reduce it to, in very broad structural terms, to half a sheet of paper, maybe, you can think about it. Just diving in there and working on it. This epic unfolds in 4 kinds of books. The first kind of book that unfolds the Old Testament are books of law. These are mostly associated with the characters Adam, Moses, and Abraham, and the central event depicted in these is the ramp up to the exodus of the Israelites from the nation of Egypt. Now, the books of the law, the first 5 in the Old Testament, answer the question, how should we live? And God provides a law about things big, like not killing, about things little, like how to treat your ox, and everything in between to answer the question, what should your life look like? What should your society look like? And then the second section of books are the historical books. These are most identified with characters like David, Solomon. The struggle between David and Goliath is probably the best known story in this second section of books, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Lots of the people in this second section are either a king or a judge. So it's very much a celebrity-based kind of an approach to the history of an ancient people, the nation of Israel. And this section of books answers the question, if we know how we should live, what happens when that knowledge is tested? By evil, by failure, by circumstances, by disaster, by drought. How do we respond to that? And does our sense of how we should live through the law of God stand up under the test of these other pressures? And let me tell you what, it's a no-holds-barred summary. Everything that can go badly for people goes badly in this section. And sometimes you read it and you go, oh, man, this is what it's like to follow God. Like it's war, famine, pestilence, and the Philistines. What's wrong with those people? Why won't they leave us alone? They're always invading and taking our crops and wiping out our troops and going back. And then next spring, they invade and take our crops away. This kind of thing. But the reason I love this section of books is it really is gloves off. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't talk about just the nice stuff. It talks about the down and dirty stuff, the ugly stuff, and says if you put what God gives you as a way to live to the ultimate test, does it really work? Does it really pan out? Does it really pay to serve God? Well, after that, the next section of books, which is the wisdom literature, is an absolute relief because it is poetry. Probably the most famous character here is the man Job. A lot of scholars believe that this is the part of the Old Testament that was actually written first. This may be one of the oldest poetic books in the world, and it is widely admired as one of the absolute finest poems of the Old Testament. Psalms and Proverbs, of course, also come to mind, where Psalms you have a large set of song lyrics. The biggest single book in the entire Bible is devoted to song lyrics, and then Proverbs is a lot of good advice, like don't go out and be stupid. That's basically a summary of what the entire book is. Stupid people have trouble. That's the whole book of Proverbs. That's all you need to know. And so we've received this way to live from God. We've tested it against the absolute worst that the world can offer to find out if it really works. And then under that test, it's like we throw ourselves back into our relationship with God and say, Lord, whether there's feast or famine, you're the one that I love. You're the one that I trust. And your wisdom is the wisdom that I want to rule and reign in my life. And in fact, that makes my heart so full, I feel a song coming on. And so the book of Psalms, as we said a couple of weeks ago, is the Broadway musical of the Bible. Because so much happens in the first two sections. It's like, if you thought of the Old Testament anthropomorphically as if it were a person, it's like the heart of the person just, have you had this feeling? It just fills right up and you say, dang, I wish I could sing. So this is why there are greeting cards in our civilization. It's for people like me who shouldn't ever be allowed to sing. And that full heart just bursts out into poetic form because ordinary vernacular speech, sometimes it's just not enough to carry your feelings, is it? That's why when you get engaged, you don't just ask, will you marry me? You give a ring. Because there are just things that words can't carry. When you love somebody, you don't just say it. You might give a lovely gift or take someone out for a nice dinner, an experience that they would enjoy. It's a way of saying that what I feel in my heart for you is so much that the words I have aren't enough. Guys, definitely use that line. Okay? So this is what the wisdom literature does. It's the full heart bursts out in song, and I mean it's a lovely thing. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. That's what the wisdom literature is about. And then after all of that joy and singing and wisdom come the prophets. You know the prophets? Oh, thou sinner. Whenever I think of the prophets from a child, I've always thought them as of these really old men with big cotton beards and bathrobes, with their hand like this, with their bony finger pointed at the guilty person, sort of trembling faintly under the self-righteous